You know, it's funny how certain smells can take you way, way back. Just the other morning, I was sitting out on the back porch, watching the sun peek over the hills, coffee in hand, old rocker creaking away, when that smell hit me. Fresh sawdust and wet concrete. Not strong, just faint, but there it was. And just like that, I was 40 years younger, standing on some half-poured job site out in San Diego, wearing a hard hat and hoping the darn rebar shipment wouldn't be late again. Ain't that something? Smells, they sneak up on ya. Anyhow, I reckon I got a little story for you today. Something's been rattling around my head lately. Won't let me be. Maybe it's this old chair, or maybe it's just one of those mornings when a man gets to thinking. You see, not many folks know this, but there was a time back in the 80s when life handed me one heck of a surprise. Oh, I'd been working hard my whole life, building bridges, freeways, office towers, always with the sleeves rolled up, boots in the dirt. Never thought myself a businessman, not one of those slick fellas you see in the papers. Nope, just an honest engineer doing an honest day's work. And yet, somehow, that's not how I made my first $1 million. Strange, huh? You work your fingers to the bone for decades, and life tosses you a curveball when you least expect it. Some nights I still shake my head about it. Oh, then while you're listening, if you don't mind, go ahead and tap that little OL, like, button down there, or leave me a note in the comments. Makes an old man smile, seeing folks out there listening. And if you feel like it, well, you can hit that subscribe doodad, too. But no pressure, just glad to have you here. Now, where was I? Ah yes. You see, it wasn't a business deal. Wasn't some fancy invention. Wasn't even good OL fashioned over time. It was the state lottery. Yep, imagine that. Me, a stubborn OL engineer who didn't even believe in dumb luck, scratching off a ticket one Sunday morning and staring down at more zeros than I'd ever seen in my life. And let me tell ya, that moment, that feeling, it sticks with a man. Right here. Now, I ain't saying money's everything. Not by a long shot. Fact is, most of the best things in my life I built with these two hands, and with this OL heart. And maybe that's why this story's been on my mind so much lately. Not cause of the cash, nah, but cause of what came after. The lessons, the people, the way life can surprise you when you least expect it. So, if you're willing, pour yourself a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and I'll tell you all about how this OL fella, a plain OL concrete and steel man, ended up holding a $1 million ticket, and what it all really meant in the end. Back then, when I was just a young'un, the world looked a whole lot different. I grew up in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of San Diego, a place where the sunset stretched long over the hills, and the air always carried a hint of salt from the ocean nearby. Folks knew each other by name, and there wasn't much that slipped by without a neighbor's watchful eye. It was a simpler time, no doubt, when the pace of life wasn't so rushed, and the evenings were for sitting on front porches, swapping stories as the cicadas sang their evening song. I was just a kid then, maybe 10 or 11, with dirt under my fingernails and dreams bigger than the sky. School was a few blocks down, and on my way home, I'd often stop by old Mr. Jenkins' workshop, where the smell of pine and varnish filled the air. That man could build anything, a bit like I'd later learned to do, only with his hands instead of blueprints. My pa was a hard-working man, honest as the day is long, and he taught me early on that integrity meant more than anything else. Son, he'd say, a man's worth is measured by how he treats others, not by what he owns. Those words stuck with me, plain and simple. Life wasn't fancy, but it was full of little rituals that made it feel like home. Sunday mornings meant pancakes at Ma's kitchen table, with syrup sticky on the fingertips and laughter filling the room. The radio would hum old tunes from a bygone era, and we'd listen as if those songs carried secrets of the past. Summers were for bike rides through dusty backroads, chasing fireflies at dusk, and the occasional swim at the nearby creek. There was magic in those moments, the kind you don't realize until you're much older. I wasn't much of a troublemaker, but I had a curiosity that often got me into some kind of mischief. Always tinkering with things, trying to figure out how they worked, clocks, radios, the odd broken toy. I guess that's where my love for building first took root, even if back then, I only knew it as a kind of wonder. I believed then that the world was a place of good people, where kindness was the glue that held everything together. I held on to that belief tight, thinking that no matter what, people would always come back around, that good would always find its way. As a young man, I had dreams that stretched far beyond our little neighborhood. I wanted to see the world, to leave a mark in a way that mattered. Not for the money, oh no, but to build something lasting, something real. I pictured myself working on big projects, towering structures that touched the sky, roads that carried people to new beginnings. And so, with a heart full of hope and a mind hungry to learn, I set out to make those dreams real. But even with all that ambition, I never lost sight of where I came from. The lessons from my pa, the quiet strength of my ma, and the simple truths of that neighborhood stayed with me like a steady anchor. I remember how, after long days of work or study, I'd sit by the window, watching the stars blink awake in the evening sky, feeling a kind of peace I can't quite put into words. It was in those moments I believed with all my heart that life was about more than just work or success. It was about connection, about the people you hold dear, and the memories you build together. Looking back now, I see that boy with his wide eyes and hopeful heart, and I smile. Because no matter where life took me, no matter how far I traveled or what I built, that simple belief that kindness and love are the truest riches has been my guiding light. And that's the story I want to share with you next. It was one of those late summer evenings, the kind where the air hangs heavy with the scent of jasmine and the sky slowly slips into shades of purple and gold. I was just back from work, tired but feeling that restless kind of energy, you know, the kind that makes a man pace his porch steps like he's got a million thoughts crowding his head all at once. That's when she showed up in my life, like a sudden breeze on a still day. Her name was Evelyn. I remember the first time I saw her, standing there by the corner store, a book tucked under her arm, and that easy, shy smile that made the whole world seem a little brighter. I swear, I don't know what it was, but my heart just skipped a beat, faster than I ever thought it could. I couldn't explain it then. Maybe I thought it was just the heat, or the dust swirling around the street lamps. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Evelyn wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She had this way of looking at things, quiet, thoughtful, like she carried a whole universe inside her eyes. We started talking, first about small things, the weather, the best place in town for a cup of coffee, the way the ocean looked at sunset. But soon enough, those talks turned into something more. She made me see the world through a different lens, as if suddenly the everyday grit and grind had a kind of meaning I'd never noticed before. It was like the first time you realized there's more to life than just putting one foot in front of the other. Her family lived just a few blocks away, and her ma, God bless her, was the kind of woman who could make anyone feel like they belonged. I met her a few times, and each visit was like stepping into a warm kitchen filled with the smell of fresh bread and laughter. Evelyn's folks were steady people, the kind that rooted you in a place and gave you a sense of home, even if you'd never lived there before. I can still hear her pa's voice, calm and sure, telling stories about their own struggles and how they believed in working hard but never losing sight of what truly matters. But it wasn't just Evelyn that shook things up. Around that same time, my old man fell ill. It hit us like a freight train. One day he was there, strong as ever, and the next, he was lying in that hospital bed, frail and quiet. Watching him struggle took a toll on me, harder than I expected. I wasn't ready for that kind of pain, that helpless feeling. I remember sitting by his side, gripping his hand and wondering how a man who'd built so many things could feel so broken. It was a tough lesson in humility, seeing strength fade and realizing some things are just out of our hands. All of it, Evelyn's gentle presence, my father's illness, it was like the world was pulling me in two directions at once. And me, I was caught somewhere in the middle, trying to make sense of a life that suddenly felt bigger and more complicated than I'd ever imagined. I couldn't explain why my heart raced when I was around Evelyn, or why I'd find myself staring at the ceiling at night, thinking about my pa's voice and wondering if things would ever be the same. But maybe that's what life does. It throws you into the deep end without a warning, and you learn to swim, one stroke at a time. That moment, that summer, it changed everything. It planted a seed of hope and fear and love all tangled up together. And looking back, I can see how it set me on a path I never could have planned, a path that would eventually lead me to places I never dreamed of. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it, and I reckon my story's no different. After that summer, the summer when Evelyn came into my life and my pa got sick, things started to unravel in ways I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't just the weight of those moments alone, but the way the world around me seemed to close in tight, like the walls of a room getting smaller and smaller. The steady rhythm I'd known all my life, work, family, small joys, it began to falter, replaced by a nagging sense of worry I couldn't shake. You see, my pa's illness wasn't just a blow to him, but to all of us. His pride, the kind you don't see but feel in the way a man holds himself, started to fade. And with that came tension I hadn't counted on. Some of my kin, well, they weren't too keen on how I was handling things. You're not a doctor, they'd say. What good is feeling sorry gonna do? Their words felt like a cold wind, cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. I wanted to help, to do right by my family, but there was this storm inside me, a mix of anger, helplessness, and shame that I just couldn't voice. At work, too, things got tricky. The projects I'd once thrown myself into with fire and grit suddenly seemed distant, like I was watching from the sidelines. Some folks at the site whispered about me, said I was distracted, not the same man I'd been. That stung worse than any injury. I kept telling myself to pull it together, but nights were the hardest. Lying awake, wrestling with doubts about whether I was strong enough, whether I was failing the people I cared about most. And then there was Evelyn. She tried, Lord knows she tried, to be my rock. But even love has its limits when weighed down by fear and uncertainty. I found myself pulling away, scared to show the cracks in my armor. The shame of not being the man I wanted to be kept me quiet, made me retreat into myself. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of her eyes, full of concern and maybe a little hurt, and it tore at me. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that it wasn't my fault, but the words got stuck somewhere deep inside. I remember one evening, a particularly rough one, when everything seemed to come crashing down. My pa was worse, the doctors said. I was tired, worn thin like a frayed rope about to snap. My mind raced with questions that had no answers. Was I doing enough? Could I have done more? And worst of all, what if I lost him? The thought of facing that kind of loss was paralyzing. It felt like I was stuck between two worlds, one where I was expected to be strong, steady, the dependable engineer, and another where I was just a scared man, unsure of his place. The pressure from outside and the storm inside started to shape a dilemma that I didn't have a map for. Do I keep pushing forward, pretending I have it all figured out? Or do I let down my guard, risk looking weak, and ask for help? Those days were some of the hardest I've ever known. But looking back, I see now that struggle was a part of the journey, a kind of reckoning that forced me to confront my fears and learn that strength isn't about never faltering, but about getting back up, no matter how many times you fall. And so, despite the doubt and the pain, I kept going. Not 'cause I was fearless, but 'cause I had to believe that somehow, through all the mess and muddle, there was still something worth fighting for. I remember that day like it was carved into my soul, clear as the California sun breaking through the morning haze. It was a moment when time itself seemed to stop, like the world held its breath just for me. I was standing outside the hospital, the kind of place where hope and heartbreak live side by side. My pa had taken a turn for the worse, and the doctors weren't giving us much to hold on to. The weight of it all pressed down so hard I could barely catch my breath. The moment I heard the news, it felt like the ground beneath me crumbled away. I wasn't just losing my father. I was losing the man who taught me how to stand tall, who showed me what it meant to work hard and be true to your word. That man, with his quiet strength and steady hands, was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I remember looking up at the sky, trying to make sense of it all, but all I saw was a blur of clouds drifting by like distant memories. But that wasn't the only blow that day. Just as the reality of my pa's illness hit its darkest point, I found out Evelyn had made a decision that shook me to my core. She told me she was leaving, moving away for good. Said she needed a fresh start, that the weight of everything was too much for her to carry alongside me. Her words cut deeper than any blade I'd ever known. I felt betrayed, abandoned in a world that already felt like it was crumbling apart. I wanted to scream, to beg her to stay, but the words caught in my throat. I stood there, numb and broken, as if the pieces of my life were scattered on the cold hospital floor. In that moment, I realized something profound, something that changed the very fabric of who I was. I lost more than just people that day. I lost the certainty I'd clung to for so long. The idea that hard work and good intentions were enough to keep everything together crumbled like the concrete in my hands. I was faced with a stark truth. Life doesn't always play fair. It twists and turns in ways you can't predict, no matter how steady you try to be. I remember the way my hands trembled as I clenched them into fists, the fire of anger mixing with a deep sadness that settled into my bones. I felt small, lost, like a ship adrift in a storm without a compass. But even in that darkness, something inside me sparked a fragile, stubborn flicker of resilience. I knew I had a choice, to let this break me or to find a way through the pain and come out stronger on the other side. That day, as the hospital corridors echoed with footsteps and whispered prayers, I made a silent promise to myself. I would honor my pa's legacy, not by holding on to what was lost, but by building something new from the rubble. I would carry forward the lessons he taught me about integrity and perseverance, even when the world felt cruel and unforgiving. It was a turning point, the kind of moment that changes a man forever. The weight of loss and betrayal forced me to look inside and find a strength I didn't know I had. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I stepped onto it with a heart heavy but determined, ready to face whatever came next. That day broke me, sure, but it also shaped me. And I reckon, in some strange way, it set me on the path to the life I'm here to tell you about. After that storm hit, after the world shifted beneath my feet, I found myself in a place I hadn't expected. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a cold blanket on a winter night. The noise of life, the hustle and bustle, faded into a dull hum, and what was left was this quiet, this stillness that pressed on my chest. It was a heavy kind of empty, like a room where the laughter had died and the shadows lingered longer than they used to. I'd lost my pa, and Evelyn was gone. The people who'd been my anchors, my reasons to keep pushing forward, were no longer there. And in that absence, I was left alone with a heart full of questions and a mind spinning with memories. The house felt too big and too quiet, and the days stretched out in a slow, painful rhythm. I'd find myself staring out the window for hours, watching the world go by, feeling like I was trapped behind glass. My faith in the way things should work, the fairness of life, the goodness of people, was shaken to its core. I'd always believed that hard work and kindness were the foundations of a good life, but now those beliefs felt fragile, like they might crumble if I looked at them too hard. I wondered if the world was just a place that took more than it gave, and if maybe I'd been fooling myself all along. But in that quiet, that stillness, something else began to stir. It wasn't a loud or sudden feeling, it was slow and tentative, like the first light of dawn pushing through a long night. I started to realize that while I'd lost a lot, I hadn't lost everything. The memories of my pa, the lessons he taught me, the kindness I'd seen in Evelyn and my neighbors, they were still there, tucked away in the corners of my heart. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start again. The days weren't easy. Some mornings, I'd wake up feeling like the weight of the world was pressing down on my chest. Other times, I'd catch myself smiling at a memory or finding comfort in a small thing, a song on the radio, the smell of coffee brewing, the way the sunlight hit the porch swing. Those little moments became lifelines, reminders that life, even in its quietest and loneliest times, still held something worth holding on to. I wasn't the same man I'd been before. The loss, the pain, they changed me in ways I didn't understand right away. I was quieter, more cautious. I carried a kind of weariness, like a shadow that followed me around. But I also carried a deeper understanding of loss, of love, of what it means to be human. It was a humbling kind of wisdom, born from the cracks in the scars. I began to see that life isn't always about the big moments or the grand achievements. Sometimes, it's about those quiet, steady breaths you take when the world feels like it's falling apart. It's about finding peace in the silence and strength in the simple act of keeping on. And maybe that's where true resilience lies, in the space between the storms, in the calm after the chaos. So I sat with that silence, let it wash over me, and slowly, ever so slowly, I started to piece myself back together. Not whole, not unbroken, but a man who had learned that sometimes surviving is its own kind of victory. Somewhere deep in the quiet that followed those hard days, I felt a flicker, a tiny spark that I hadn't expected to find. It was subtle, almost like a whisper on the wind, but it was enough to stir something inside me. You know how sometimes life gives you a little nudge just when you think you're too far gone to keep going? Well, that's what happened to me. It came on a slow Tuesday afternoon. I was walking down the street, aimless really, with nothing but the sound of my own footsteps to keep me company. That's when I passed by the local community center. I wasn't planning to stop, but something made me slow down, glance inside. There was a group of folks gathered, volunteering to fix up an old playground, painting swings, tightening bolts, laughing despite the hard work. The scene struck me like a breath of fresh air, this simple act of building something for others, for kids who might not have much but still deserved a place to play and dream. I felt that old urge rise up, the one I'd had as a boy, the one that led me to engineering and building things with my hands. It was like a reminder that even when life tears things down, there's always a chance to rebuild, to create something new. So, I walked in, offered my help. Just a small thing, really, but for me, it was the first step out of the shadow. Helping those folks, lending a hand with the paintbrush and tools, I started to feel a shift. It wasn't about the work itself, though that was satisfying enough. It was about the feeling of connection, of purpose. I wasn't alone in this anymore. There was a community, a rhythm to life that pulsed beyond my own troubles. And in that rhythm, I found a kind of hope. That little project gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing, a second chance. Not just at building playgrounds, but at building a life that mattered in a different way. It was a chance to take all the lessons I'd learned, the heartbreak, the loss, the struggles, and turn them into something meaningful. Not for the sake of money or recognition, but for the simple joy of making a difference. I started to see that maybe life's richest rewards come not from the big wins or the jackpots, but from the small moments of kindness and effort. The afternoon spent fixing a swing, the smiles of the kids who'd soon be playing on it, the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd done something good. Those moments rekindled a fire in me, a gentle but steady light that began to guide me forward. And with that light came new dreams. Not the grand ambitions of youth, but more grounded, more real. Dreams of community, of leaving something behind that others could enjoy long after I was gone. Dreams of reconnecting with people, building bonds that were stronger than any concrete or steel. It wasn't an easy road, mind you. Old doubts still crept in, and some days felt heavier than others. But that spark kept burning, and with every small step I took, I found a little more strength, a little more peace. It was a new chapter, a fresh start carved out of the wreckage. So here I am, telling you this story, not because it's about a sudden miracle or some grand fortune, but because it's about the quiet power of second chances, the way life can surprise you, even when you think all hope is lost. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most valuable lesson of all. There came a moment, quiet and unassuming on the surface, but heavy as a mountain in my heart. It was the kind of moment you don't see coming, the kind that sneaks up on a man after all the noise and struggle has died down. I sat alone in my old workshop, the one place that always felt like home, surrounded by the tools and scraps of a life built piece by piece. I held in my hands an old, worn-out hard hat, the very one I'd worn on countless job sites across California. It had seen decades of sweat and labor, of triumphs and setbacks alike. And that day, I made a choice. I looked at that hard hat and felt the weight of all the years it represented, the long hours, the sacrifices, the dreams, and the losses. For so long, I'd been carrying the past with me like a heavy pack, dragging it through every step of my journey. But that day, I realized it didn't have to be that way anymore. The past was there. Sure, it was a part of me, but it didn't have to define who I was or dictate where I was going. I could let it rest. So I set the hard hat down, right there on the workbench, and took a deep breath. I told myself, quietly but firmly, I'm choosing to live, to keep moving forward. No more holding on to what can't be changed. It was a release, a letting go that felt like both an ending and a beginning. I was done carrying regret and sorrow like chains around my ankles. That decision didn't come easy. There were tears, quiet, honest tears that spoke of the pain and the love and the long road behind me. But with those tears came a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I saw that life was fragile, yes, but also resilient. That grief and joy can live side by side in the same heart. That forgiveness of others, of myself, was the key to finding peace. In the days that followed, I started to make changes, small but significant. I cleaned out the corners of my life that had been gathering dust, old letters, faded photographs, things that tied me to sorrow I no longer needed to carry. I reached out to people I'd lost touch with, mended fences that had been left broken too long. I even took a trip back to that neighborhood where it all began, walking the streets with new eyes and a lighter heart. It wasn't about forgetting or pretending the past never happened. It was about embracing the fullness of my story, the good and the bad, the laughter and the tears, and choosing to move forward without bitterness. I realized that life isn't about perfection or holding on to what should have been. It's about acceptance, about finding grace in the messiness of being human. And so, I made a promise to myself to live with no regrets, no grudges, just a simple commitment to keep walking the path ahead, to treasure the moments I have left, and to build new memories with the people I love. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I do know this: choosing to let go was the greatest gift I ever gave myself. That day, setting down that hard hat, I felt a kind of freedom I hadn't known before. It was like stepping out of a long shadow into the light. I was ready to live, to love, and to find joy in whatever time I have left, without pretensions, without regrets, just moving forward. That's the choice I made, and it's carried me through every day since. You know, after all these years, after all the twists and turns life threw my way, I've come to understand something that I wish someone had told me when I was younger. It ain't about money or success, or even the big milestones we all chase. No, the real lessons come from the quiet moments in between, the ones that slip past without much notice but leave a mark on your soul. I spent a good part of my life believing that if I worked hard enough, did everything right, I'd get what I deserved. That was the way I built my world, one project at a time, one blueprint after another. And sure, I made a living, built some things to be proud of. But when I won that $1 million, unexpected, out of the blue, I realized that life doesn't always follow the plans we lay out. Luck, chance, the kindness of strangers, those things play a bigger role than we like to admit. What really stuck with me, though, wasn't the money. It was what came after. The loss, the love, the struggles to keep going when everything felt like it was falling apart. Those experiences taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or possessions. It's found in the relationships we build, the kindness we give, and the resilience we carry when the world knocks us down. I learned that life's surprises, good or bad, are part of the journey. You can't control everything, no matter how much you try. Sometimes, you have to let go of the idea that everything will be perfect, and instead, focus on what really matters, the people around you, the moments that make you smile, and the courage to face each new day. Maybe that's the most important thing I want to share. Don't wait for the perfect moment, the big break, or the lucky win to start living. Don't hold your happiness hostage to what might happen someday. Sometimes, the best life is the one you build from where you are, with what you've got. I look back on that young boy with big dreams, and I'm proud of the man he became, not because of the $1 million or the projects, but because he learned to find meaning in the small things, to forgive himself for mistakes, and to keep moving forward despite the odds. So if there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this: life is unpredictable and sometimes unfair, but it's also filled with moments of grace if you're willing to see them. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for something outside yourself to change your world. Maybe it's time to start building the life you want, right here, right now, with the hands and heart you've got. And if I can leave you with a final thought, it's this: don't be afraid to take that first step, even if you don't know where it leads, because sometimes that's all it takes to turn a life around. Well now, here we are at the end of this little journey I've been sharing with you. It's been quite a ride, hasn't it? Life has a funny way of taking us down roads we never planned to travel, but somehow, those twists and turns shape us into the folks we're meant to be. I hope as you've listened, you've felt a bit of that old porch-side conversation, that warmth and honesty that comes from a man who's seen his share of sunrises and sunsets. I want to ask you something I've thought about a lot over the years. Tell me, do you believe that true love is meant to come back around? That some connections, no matter the distance or the time, find their way back into our lives when the moment's right? I've often wondered if Evelyn, with her quiet smile and thoughtful eyes, still thinks of those days we shared. Sometimes, in the stillness of an evening, I swear I can feel her presence, like a soft breeze reminding me that some things never really leave us. This story I've told you, it ain't just about the past. It's about the here and now, the present moment we're lucky enough to live in. It's about the lessons learned, the wounds healed, and the hope that keeps flickering inside, even when the nights grow long and the road seems lonely. It's a reminder that life keeps moving, that we keep changing, but the heart holds on to the things that truly matter. I want you to carry that with you, not just the story of an old engineer who once won $1 million in a lottery, but the story of a man who found meaning in loss, who discovered strength in weakness, and who chose to keep going, even when the path wasn't clear. Because maybe, just maybe, that's what we all need to remember. So as you go about your days, I hope you'll pause now and then to think about your own story, about the loves you've had, the dreams you still chase, and the moments that have shaped you. And when life throws its surprises your way, good or bad, I hope you find the courage to face them with an open heart. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, some things are meant to come back around. Sometimes, I catch myself wondering if Evelyn remembers, if she feels the same pull of those old days. It's a thought that warms me, even now, after all this time. Thank you for listening, for sharing this time with me. It means more than you know. And if you ever feel like coming back to sit a spell, I'll be here, rocking in my chair, ready to share another story. Until then, take care of yourself, and keep your heart open, because life's full of surprises, and you never know what's just around the bend.